Welcome everyone. Nice to see the faces come back from yesterday. Yeah, welcome to day 2 of Freedom Thinkings for the Love of Life via donation online retreat. If anybody wishes to make a donation, they can make it via PayPal. We like friends and family, if that's all right. And our PayPal ID is info@freedomthinking.co.uk. You can make donations at that. And if you're in a position you can't afford to make donations, what we're asking is that people pay it forward with an act of kindness towards somebody else. Got a lovely message off Dan, who was on yesterday, saying he was going to make a donation and pay it forward, which was lovely. So that's what we're asking for this retreat. We're hoping that people are going to get some value from it. We're going to be answering questions, and what we thought was leading on from yesterday, Myra, it might have been Myra, somebody was talking about, could we talk a bit more about ego? So I thought we'd start with that today. We do have Lucia, so it may be that right now she's fast asleep. She was spark out, wasn't she? She just spark out. So it may be that one of us has to dash off. If you see one of us get up and run, we're all right. Yeah, knock everything over, laptop flying. It's because Lucia's woken up. So one of us will be in and out throughout the evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're at. So please bear with us. We're trying to juggle work and brand new parenthood, or fairly new parenthood. So I thought, Jen, you start because we've got you and you're here.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, because a few more people have joined. So today we're going to go till 5:30. Then we'll have a break until 7 and come back for Christine Heath, who will be on 7 till 8:30. So yeah, each day it's slightly different just because of time zones and things, but we'd love that. So you were saying about talking about ego, but I'd love it if there was anyone that has come on today with a question or something that's on their mind or something from yesterday. It'd be nice to address that first.
Questions, reflections, observations.
Yeah, because I think we are normally a little bit more organized and we have like a schedule, but the last time we didn't do that, it was quite nice because it felt like it naturally came to questions and observations, and it was quite nice not to have the rigidity. Yeah. But we want this to be like a community thing, because I know that so many people really learn from hearing other people speak about things that they've seen. Like it's a community space and we're all learning from one another. And we're all teachers, and I think that's the beautiful thing. So if there's something that you'd like to ask, you can either type it in or chat, or if there's something that you've noticed or seen after yesterday, it'd be really nice to hear from people.
Cool. I like that. And there's no wrong question. There's no silly question. There's no question too complicated. There's no question too simple.
Well, I wanted to say something about yesterday.
Go, Myra.
I got a lot out of the question that I asked, and one of the things that really stuck with me was how he was saying the wisdom of the moment and staying with the wisdom of the moment. Because if I get overly stressed out or overly worried about somebody who's not doing well or whatever, I kind of go unconscious and I start jumping to the future, the past, and you know what I mean? And I actually drop out of the moment. And so staying with the wisdom of the moment and having the confidence that I do have wisdom with me, especially if I stay in the moment, that really stuck with me. And so that was really great.
Cool.
What amazed me about your question is I had the earphones in and you started speaking, and the question you were asking was almost identical to one that somebody had texted me. I was thinking, do these guys know each other?
You asked me that, didn't you?
Yeah, because
no, we didn't. I saw her message in the chat too, and I said, "Oh, that's funny."
Because they'd messaged me, because I didn't see the chat message. I'd only seen what they'd messaged privately. So I was like, wow, it feels like, yeah. So it was that's the thing. Sometimes I didn't realize it. The lady had put it in the chat as well. But sometimes we sort of don't want to ask something, but if we do, it might be that someone else needed to hear that too, but hadn't wanted to ask. So it really benefits the group when people ask questions, and I love the answer. And it kind of
Yeah, it was
reminds
great.
I remember when someone asked Aaron Turner on our last retreat, and he just said, he was saying about the way he described it, you know, staying in your own lane, like really taking care of yourself and kind of where you're coming from. And I think there'd been a question about, you know, there's so much stuff happening in the community at the moment, and different things popping up and different discussions and debate, and he was just like, bring it back to your center, bring it back to you. And I felt like Keith was kind of speaking to that yesterday, that it's so easy to look at somebody else, and I don't know, it can feel easy to see other people's things playing out, and then we can sometimes then forget, yeah, but I'm also playing out some kind of story, and invisible thinking and invisible conditioning. So I loved the answer, and I felt there's a synchronicity of both of you wanting him to speak to that was wonderful. And one that I said to Dave afterwards, did you enjoy it? And he said, God, there was just so much there.
It's very simple.
Yeah, and I think
so much there.
There's the heartfeltness and the, you know, Keith's been a student of life, of the principles for 45 years. And I still feel like he doesn't sit there and try and be an expert or say that he's got life sussed. He was just so human and gentle. And I feel like it's nice because no one is a guru, no one's better. There isn't a hierarchy. Like, I know I've created things in my mind before thinking if I could just be more like, or I thought, you know, at some point I'd hear enough in the principles that I just live on this like floating cloud. But it's really nice to hear Keith say, you know, 45 years in, I still get caught out sometimes, but then you notice and you learn, and your relationships get richer from it. And I think that's the thing I really gained from yesterday, was just that we're all students of this life stuff, and we try and put words to it, but it's not something that we can hold or have. It's just something to start noticing and be grateful for. Sarah.
Yeah, I just listened to him this morning, like listened back a little bit, and it just blew me away. Like, I just think where he's coming from, but also what he said about it being like, it's just a formula. I don't know if you heard that, or if he actually said those words, but like, it's literally those three things create our experience, and that's it. And there was something so simple and refreshing about hearing that that's what the three principles is. It's not like a way to get anywhere or anything. It's not like, yay, let's learn the three principles. It's like, it's literally how our reality of our experience of life is. And I just, yeah, just really good to hear that again. Really so simple, and really brought me back to what I love about this understanding, that it's not self-help, it's not trying to get anywhere. It's literally, we don't have to do anything. This is how it is. That's what I heard from him. And yeah, I just thought he was such a gentle, generous, loving man. I haven't heard about him before. So I haven't heard him before. So it was I'm really grateful that you asked him on here. Like, it's, yeah, what a gem.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I think one of the things that really struck me is, after spending time with Keith and Valda, like, it blew my mind so much. But then I got in my own misunderstanding and kind of wanted to be able to share like them, or share their message. So it was interesting because in some ways it really enhanced kind of what I was sharing initially, because I was just blown away by the simplicity of it, and so many concepts I'd had and misunderstandings I'd had fallen away. But then I kind of got in the trap of wanting to be like and try and teach like them because of that, because of what the richness they brought to it. And I noticed I started like stumbling a bit and it not feeling authentic anymore, because they share something. I don't know if Keith really mentioned it yesterday, but they were
No.
sharing the 3 principles as a paradigm. So I know I heard him mention that, you know, there's different paradigm shifts that have happened within human history that literally change everything, like the sun-centered solar system and all those things. But it was interesting because that was just something that they saw insightfully, and it came alive for them, and it became a way that they shared. But it felt yesterday that, again, I know Keith still will share in that way, and he sees this is a non-dual teaching, but it felt he'd kind of gone to a different level and was just sharing in a different way. And I think that's the beauty of this. And I think being around it such a long time, it's been lovely to hear and see people get massively inspired and shift and shed, and have a way of sharing, but then to see the evolution that then happens with understanding, because they're, you know, it's this simple thing, but the depth is endless. And I think that's what I've seen in the community, is every single teacher that I've kind of been aware of, who I've got to witness, it's not an end point. This is like, it's always a new beginning. It's always a starting point of exploration, but it is so simple. But yeah, I think that he came across so loving, and
He just is, isn't he?
yeah.
Myra, I just wanted to go back to that point about you were making about worrying about people. Can everybody hear us okay? Cool. Thank
Yes, I hear you good.
you. And thanks, lovely. It's interesting because worry, when you look at worry, it's always based in the future. It's always based in the future. And then when you start to look at suffering in general, you'll see it's always based in time. We're regretful, we're in remorse, we're in grief, whatever that may be. Well, that'll be past related, guilt. You've got your worries, your anxieties, they're always based in the future. And this is why Keith spoke an awful lot about the wisdom of the now. Because when we are present, there is no suffering. Suffering is created from judgment. Suffering is created from our judgments. What are our judgments? Our judgments are thoughts that appear real to us. They are a potential from within the infinite that we have assumed to be accurate or a true representation. But once we start to see that suffering is based in time, again, we'll go back to that point about when people have an experience of the now, a true experience of the now, when people really fall present, they generally describe it as being quite a spiritual experience because they're meeting Creator exactly where it is, in the now. The Creator only exists in the now, doesn't exist in the future or the past. It's just the eternal now. That's why people have these spiritual experiences. They say they meet God. Well, what is it? It's a state of presence within ourselves. And again, when people are realized, people are often referred to, people who've had encounters of the now are often described as realized people. Where do realizations take place? Well, they take place from within. So being in the now isn't really a moment in time. It's a state of being. It's a state of consciousness. It has nothing to do with time, doesn't the now? It has nothing to do with time. We often think of the now as being the interim point between the past and the future. It's kind of how we can quite often picture it. And we can often kind of give ourselves a little bit of a grace period around the now. Perhaps we may say live for today. Well, today isn't the now. The now is the now. This morning is the past. This evening is the future. It doesn't exist. There's just this here now. This is all there is. And I enjoy it when I was walking along with somebody the other day who was stressing about the past, something a husband had done when he'd done some horrific things, God bless him, friggin' hell, horrific things. And I asked her, I said, come on, can I have a look at you? She bought herself a new camper van. I said, can I see your van? And we went round and we're looking at a van. And after 10, 15 minutes, we finished looking at the van. It was a beautiful little van. We were walking back. I could feel her. She was peaceful. I said, stop you just now. And she stopped. I said, may I ask you, how do you feel right now? Right now? And she said, I feel good. Her suffering was being created by her remembering the past. That was all. And the moment her attention, like we discussed yesterday, the moment her attention came off it and onto the van, she was feeling good again. To realize this is what suffering is. This is what suffering is created from. This is what Sid brought to the world. Here, you want the true answer to what suffering is created from? Well, it's the same thing that joy is created from as well. It's yourself. It kind of it just makes life very, very simple. Just makes life very, very simple. And you end up with that statement, the wisdom of the now. That's where you'll find it. Because we've never once stepped out of the now. There's no outside of the now. It doesn't exist. We can just dream that there is an outside of the now. We can just dream that there is a future. We can dream that there is a past. I remember a lady coming to work with us, and she's not on at the moment, but she was worried because she was getting glaucoma. She was getting glaucoma. And she was really, really worried. And we're walking along and said, it's impossible to be afraid of the future, you know. She said, what do you mean? And I said, well, it doesn't exist in order for you to be afraid of it. It doesn't exist. So therefore, it is impossible for you to actually be afraid of the future. It's impossible. It's impossible to be afraid of the future. Nobody's actually afraid of the future. I said, but I can clearly see you are worried. She's obviously based in the future, based in time. What might happen? And I just got to speak to her about my observations of my own worry one day when I realized that what I was actually afraid of was a creation, a thought that I had created in the now. And I was actually afraid of that image. And I kept on replaying that image, assuming it was the future, when in actual fact, it was a thought being created in the now. That was such a wonderful lesson to realize I cannot be afraid of the future because it doesn't exist. You cannot be afraid of what doesn't exist because it doesn't exist to be afraid of. And this conversation seems to highlight the illusions that we've lived out of as a species. It seems to bring them to light for us to see them for what they are. Saw a little bit of the Labyrinth the other day, didn't we? I used to love Labyrinth with David Bowie and whatnot. And at the end, she says, "You have no power over me," to the Goblin King. And it all comes crashing down. A bit like the Wizard of Oz when he's revealed for who he actually is, what he actually is. It's a bit like that. You just realize we've been living under these misunderstandings of the nature of reality. That's why Einstein said that time was relative, but it's relative to each and every individual. Everybody experiences time differently. because it's made up within our consciousness. Again, time exists within thought. Thought does not exist within time. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that.
Someone was just asking about trauma. You can't just say, you know, it's not now, so forget about it. So can we speak to that?
And also there was a Kathos question as well.
Okay. Which one do you want to go to first?
Well, we're kind of on that subject
Okay.
now, aren't we? So we'll stick with that, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've got a book and I've only read part of it, but Keith got really excited and when he found this book. So it's called Individual Differences in Post-Traumatic Stress Response. And it's a lady who kind of studied people who'd gone through different traumas and stresses and of different severities. And she was trying to find the link, like, is there something that can happen that always creates post-traumatic stress symptoms? Or like she was trying to look for the common theme and what was it? And throughout this book, you could see that it wasn't the severity of what happened. It wasn't what had happened. It wasn't to do with the person's past or age, or like she couldn't find anything to give an answer to why some people and some people not. And when Keith read this book, he felt like it was evidence pointing to Sid's message, pointing to the fact of thought, to the fact of how we create reality and how innocently the misuse of thought, we can keep creating that same trauma over and over again. So one of the things I remember a lady asking a question on a course who was a police lady, and she was getting really annoyed, like, you say, because she'd been diagnosed with PTSD and had been really struggling after a particularly horrific incident on the job. And she was like, are you saying it didn't happen? You're saying it's not real? And the person just said, no, it happened once. That's what I'm saying. It happened once. And she was literally reliving it over and over again and giving it so much attention. And so it's not that we don't do that, but we can't experience the past without thought. We can't experience the past without consciousness. And we can't experience anything without the energy that these three principles are describing. So it's not that it didn't happen, but the only way that we experience it now is via thought. And the more that we see that, we seem to get gifted insight and freedom of thought to start recreating. And I don't know, I feel like we're scratching the surface of something so profound and so miraculous. I don't know why some people seem to be able to have thought and drop thought and have thought and drop thought, and it just seems to kind of bounce off them, and other people seem to just hold on and get wedded and feel trapped by. But I feel the principles offers an explanation of how it's created, and that there is wisdom and guidance built into us. And I know that for myself, I've sometimes been guided to go and have different treatments. I saw a body stress release person, and I was just going for my back, and she told me it would help my back. And at the end, she said, "Oh, tomorrow you might feel, might be tearful, you might be emotional." I was like, I don't know what I would be. And then the next day, I had this massive breakdown, and this massive release happened, and I've got no idea. And it felt like it shifted something. So I can see that what we think of as thought, or what we think of as the principles, is so vast and unexplainable that I don't know. But I've loved how that constant is almost like an anchor or a starting point. And then what makes sense to me to do in my life that I feel benefit, I do that. And that's one of the things I hope people hear from this 3 days is it's about recognizing the freedom of mind. We don't want people to follow us. We don't want people to believe us. We don't want people to get caught in any form of dogma. We want people to understand they have a free mind, free thought, and it's in this moment of possibilities and potential. So I'd hope that when I was with Sydney Banks, the only time I ever got to see him live was a 3-day event in London. I think it was just a few months before he passed away, so he was quite poorly. And it was interesting because when he walked in, he looked quite old, and as soon as he sat down and started speaking, it's like this light kind of came out of him, and someone kept asking him, but I work with victims of traumatized people who've been through
Torture.
I think it was torture, yeah. How would you talk to those kind of people? And it was interesting because what I heard in his answer was, start to see this for yourself. Start to see this to be true for yourself. And then when you show up with people, you'll know what to say. And it was quite an interesting thing, because the question kept sort of being then asked in slightly different ways. And Sid's answer was always, start to see this for yourself. Start to get a sense or a feel of the truth of this. Play with it. Is it true for you? Is it true? Don't take my word for it. You know, he was always saying that. And then when you're with someone, show up for them. And I know there's been times when I've had a call with someone or one-to-one in person, and all I've needed to do is listen and listen and listen and listen for the first session, few sessions. And then sometimes when we've worked with people over 4 days, our only role initially is to listen. And then other people, it's like we immediately sort of go into sharing, and that's the thing. This isn't a prescription. So I'd never just say to someone, "Oh, it's in the past, don't think about it." Like, that is the truth of it. Like, something is in the past, but how we think about it now that's what's up for grabs.
Yeah. So the question was, yes, if someone had a trauma, basically, I'm assuming this word, I'm going to read it as I think it's meant to say. Yes, if someone had a trauma, it's not okay. Can you just...
Yeah, I was going to say, if someone's had a trauma, you can't just say it's okay, it's not now, forget about it. How do we think about this question?
Yeah, that's a cool question. That's a really cool question. But I would say, don't be afraid to share truth. Don't shy away from truth. You know, for people to realize that it's over is a massive relief for many, many people. So, for example, we had a man come to one of our community groups once. He was, what's it called when you...
Agoraphobic.
He was agoraphobic. Yeah, he'd had an argument with a neighbour and a few other things going on in his life. And this argument with the neighbour was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And he ended up going home and rocking in a corner. He didn't leave the house for 20 years. Now, I knew this man 20 years before I actually saw him. I'd seen him for 20 years, and I bumped into him on the street, and he'd obviously known about the work that we do, and he asked me about it. And long story short, he plucked up the courage and he came to a community group, and he was terrified, wasn't he? God bless him.
Yeah, because he only ever went out to get his prescription or sometimes fishing, if he didn't think anyone else would be there.
Yeah, and I bumped into him when he was getting his prescription, and he was terrified, was that man on the street. But the next day I got a text off him after this, after our community group, which we used to run in person, and bless him, he'd not left the house for 20 years. And I got this text saying, "You'll never guess where I am." Now, me and him used to take a lot of drugs together. And my first thought was, please don't be in a prison cell. Please don't be banged up. But he said, I woke up and I felt different this morning. And so I decided I'd try and take the dog for a walk to the end of the road. He hadn't done that in 20 years. He said, I got to the end of the road and he said, I looked around. He said, I realized I was safe. He said, so I kept walking. He lives in Kendal, town where I'm from. He said, so I kept walking. He said, I'm at the other end of town. Town has totally changed. I don't recognize it. And then he wrote at the end, but I'm free. This man has spent 20 years in the psychiatric system, medicated. I remember we interviewed him. He's on our website. His name's Nick. He's on our website. He won't mind me speaking about this. And we said, Nick, was there something you heard that set you free? And he said, yes. I distinctly remember what was said. I said, what was it? And he said, when you said the past no longer exists, it's now a thought. To me, that was so obvious. So obvious, I take that for granted. That's my default setting nowadays. It's gone. It's over. But to that man, he hadn't had that realization yet. And then later on in the interview, he said, I've also forgiven the man who abused me as a child. I don't know what kind of abuse it was. He never expanded. He said, I've carried the weight of that for, was it 50 odd years? Mm-hmm. What happened to me as a child? He said, I carried the weight of that. He said, and it left when I realized that he acted on a thought, but he didn't know that. He said, and I forgave him. And the suffering left. Don't be afraid to share truth. You're all wise people. You will share it in your way when you think the time is right, how you think is correct. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the truth. Truth sets people free. Truth will set you free. Yeah, there you go, Anna. Exactly that, love. The truth sets you free.
Read this. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
So, Dr. Gabor Mate and others' research suggests that adverse childhood experiences predispose people to develop PTSD and also autoimmune illnesses, cancer, MS, etc. Doesn't mean Sid's approach wouldn't work, though.
No, it doesn't change the fact.
Well, I think that's why that book was so powerful, because like similar traumas, different outcome. So what is it? Because there's always all these anomalies. So you can't find truth if there's anomalies, but the fact of thought, the fact that we create reality now is always, that's a constant. And I think that's one of the things, like it's a black and white thing. Reality is created in the moment now. And I think it sort of speaks a little bit to conditioning. Of course, there is invisible stuff going on within us that we act from. But I feel like what the principles did to me is like it took it out of conscious, unconscious, good, bad, right, wrong thinking to this power of thought, or this mind, this consciousness state. And it took so much off my mind, because then you stop trying to separate thought, separate experiences. It all becomes this one happening. And so many people have found freedom from the most traumatic, awful experiences in life. And I think when we were in South Africa and we got to work in the refugee centre, it blew our mind, some of the stories. And I don't know, I think the kindness, the love and the gentleness that got shown to us from people who'd had the most horrific things happen to them, and that they were finding peace of mind and finding forgiveness and setting themselves free, because we cannot change what happened in the past, and people do horrific things to themselves, to other people, to animals, to the planet. But it feels like the principles almost gives us that opportunity to recognize the power that is within us. And I know that some people recognize that and really set themselves free, and others, for whatever reason, don't. But the potential exists, and I think that's what I've always loved about the principles, that is there's the potential exists within every single being, regardless of circumstance in the past. So it's not to say that there aren't things that happen in life that people will struggle with, but if one person seems to manage to overcome it, it means that that potential exists for us to overcome. And we see it again and again and again within humanity, within life, within nature. So I'm aware, Amanda, you put your hand up a little while ago, and I wanted.
Can I just say something quickly? And but also, Kath did ask a question as well. Yeah, I was just, forgive me, Amanda, 1 second, love. Just going back to the question, just at the end, might be semantics, Leslie, this might be semantics, where you describe Sid's approach. Doesn't mean Sid's approach wouldn't work. Yeah, the principles aren't an approach. They're not an approach. And I'm not defending anything here. I'm trying to make a distinction. The principles aren't a means by which to feel good. You use the principles to create depression. You use the principles to create anger. We use the principles to create war, addiction, hate, vengeance. The principles are pre-existing logic. They are the pre-existing force through which all reality is born. Now, bear in mind, we've lived in a time when we've assumed reality is external to ourselves. Our reality is external to ourselves. This is a conversation about aligning with the logical truth and fact of the fact that reality is born from within us. We've looked 180 degrees in the wrong direction for the explanation of reality. Reality is an experience. That's what reality is. Without the fact of experience, there is no reality. So when people often clump the three principles into a toolbox, they'll say, oh, it's in 3 principles is in my toolbox. Well, that's a misunderstanding of the 3 principles. It's not an approach. It's not a means by which, like, you couldn't put it alongside NLP, CBT, regressive therapy or anything like that, because it doesn't, it's not a case of you shouldn't. It's a case of they're just different conversations. One of them is looking at reality and how do we change reality? How can we manipulate reality? What can we do? Try this approach, try this mantra, try this, try that. And the other one, the 3 principles, is a conversation. Do you know what reality is in the first place that you're trying to manipulate? You want to have a different life, but have you ever questioned what is life? Most people haven't. What is this life that you're trying to have a different one of? Now, it isn't a therapy three principles are not a therapeutic approach, but the therapeutic value of realizing the illusion of life is it's immeasurable. And it's something that will show up every single day within your life. But if we're listening to this as an approach to feel, to change our lives, understand it's a description of how life is actually born. And people will find so much more power, so much more value when they stop trying to use the principles to fix themselves. Because if we're trying to fix ourselves, we're living in the belief that we're broken, which is an illusion, which is a story, which isn't a fact. Whereas the point that the principles is pointing to is a fact. All reality is born from what you may want to call mind, consciousness, thought. Three attributes of the same force. And it's from those three attributes of the same force. And that's just a conversation. That's just words. Mind, consciousness, thought is just words. And then words are just noises. It's not in the noise. It's not in the letters, the symbols. Like the word pen is a noise. Pen. I had to learn to make that noise to describe that. The noise is not the object. Go past the noise to the object. And when that starts to settle in, once we start to go beyond these words and it starts to perhaps create a resonance within ourselves, perhaps starts to uplift our being, then you'll know that there is something taking place within, because the true hearer, not the ego, the true hearer, is starting to align with the truth, the logic. That's why Sid always said, look for a feeling. You're looking for a feeling, you're not looking for information, you're not looking for intellectual food. I just wanted to expand on that. Amanda, have you got a question? What's your thing, love? Should we go to Kath?
It's not a question. Basically, because you're talking about PTSD, about 6 months ago, I got PTSD about a year ago, last January. Maisie's best friend's sister died. And on her 20th birthday, I think they had to close the machine off. What I wanted to say is that basically knowing about the principles doesn't make us immune from suffering. And it was really shocking to me because I didn't realize that incident sort of triggered, because my brother was killed when I was young. And I remember the night that I heard about Mia dying, my mind, I felt it. I mean, this is a long time ago, 30 odd years. Go back and just remember everything. And then in like late October, November, I just think I was under a lot of pressure in myself. You know, all the Gaza situation started kicking off, and my best friend is in Israel. And it took me about 10 days to call her. And I was just sort of checking in with her every day. Anyway, things just escalated. And I started stuttering really badly, like I did when I was a kid after my brother was killed. So, and even at one point I was staying in this hotel and I woke up and I was charging toward the door as if I was like in a war. I mean, horrendous symptoms, but I'm reflecting on it now because sometimes you try and understand it and you can't understand it. But I spoke to one of my teachers and she said sometimes things kind of come back around for us to see, if you like, and have a deeper understanding of that. Yes, I just wanted to share that really, because it's been really, I feel like I've been recovering from that the last 6 months. I haven't been working or anything, and I felt really exhausted. But really, yeah, I've had a lot of trauma in my life, you know, and obviously I've known about the principles for about 10 years or something, and I've had really amazing insights, and I do feel like I've got a good understanding, but it doesn't, yeah, that happened. So just to share that really.
No, thank you, love. We often say this isn't an anesthetic to life.
No, and sometimes just, yeah, stuff comes along and we, you know, Sid said about life being a contact sport, and it is.
But the
You
beauty,
can have our understanding, but it's I do feel like I've got a good understanding, and I knew that was just thought coming through. But when you're having I had severe panic attacks, I think I knew that it was because I was thinking about whatever, but overwhelm, or it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it was shocking to me. I think it was shocking to everybody else around me as well. You know, they were really concerned, but I knew that I would get through it, and to trust my own process, whatever that is, whatever that means. So I just wanted to share that because I have, you know, done so many courses, and obviously I know a lot of three principle people. I feel like I've lived my life in that way, where through having that understanding, and yet.
yeah, this is it.
So
This is one of the things, you know, we do have quite often, we come to this with an expectation of life isn't going to happen, you know, and quite often, I mean, when I first woke up, I thought I got one over on life. And when I was humbled by life, deeply humbling thing, this existence stuff. When I was humbled by life, I was taught a lesson. But one thing I did start to gain a real gratitude for was, not in the moment, don't get me wrong, but was for my suffering. I look back at my life and I see that my deepest suffering points were my times of greatest growth. And when you know, I was never the same man, and I've had different chapters throughout my various lives I've had during this lifetime. I've had different chapters of suffering, but each one has, in the long run, I never had eyes for this until I started to get eyes for it. In the long run, I started to see that each one of these was a gift. Like I said, I would never have said that in the moment, and I would have done anything to switch it off. But in the long run, each one created more compassion, created more humility, it allowed me to love deeper, it allowed me to forgive more. And those are the things I really value in life. Those are the things that I kind of strive to have more of. You know, so it's quite interesting when you do approach. For me, it's very different, very interesting when I approach life like that. Like, where's this one going to take me? Where's this lostness going to take me? What am I going to gain? What's the gift in the end? I remember I really lost my shit at your mum's hedge. Jen's mum asked me to cut a hedge, and Kath's mum on screen under the alias of Deepma. She asked me to trim a hedge, and I said, right, Liz, do you want it spirit level, or do you want it going with the gradient of the ground? And she said, spirit level. And Arthur said, great. Hedges always look better spirit level, I think. especially shorter ones. So I got up and I did this great job on this hedge. You got it lovely and level, really, really neat. Next day, Liz went, "You haven't done what I asked you to do." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I didn't want it flat." She said, "I wanted it going with the gradient of the ground." And I said to her, "Do you know what a spirit level is?" And she was like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Well, a spirit levels level. And she was like, so we had this conversation. I was like, right, fine, stuck my chainsaw pants back on, got up in the hedge, and I was in such a bad mood. I was frigging swinging the chainsaw about. I don't even like doing this work anymore. I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I just felt obliged to do it, really, because the family, and I stuck the chainsaw into my trousers
By mistake.
by mistake, not on purpose. Thankfully, I was wearing my ballistics and it didn't cut my leg. And with that, I threw my chainsaw out of the hedge, took my helmet off, jumped out the hedge, booted it down the garden, lost my earmuff. And with that, Jenny said, "I think you need to go home." And home is where we're at right now, in Auntie Sue's house at that moment. So I came home and I just sat in the bath. I sat in the bath till it went cold, 3.5 hours. And I had this very kind of trippy experience, like colours, and saw a dove come out through my mind's eye and all kinds of weird stuff. I was just like, I was paralysed with this experience. And I woke up in the morning, this little quiet voice, as sometimes happens to me, this little quiet voice said to me, "You know, the further you go into suffering, the further into unreality you have entered." The further you go into suffering, the further into unreality you have entered. Further away from love we have dreamt. I remember that being just one of the most beautiful little statements I've ever heard. So simple. That's what we do on this planet, in this dimension. We create unreality that we think is reality. That is reality. It's the game. It's the game of life. Every single one of us thinks our reality is the truth. Amanda, thanks for sharing that, love. I'd quite like to go to Kath's question. Kath, are you still there, love?
Sorry, yes, I am.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Love that girl.
Yeah.
Kath's question was, talk a bit more about It's All Thought. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, just that. I've heard that so many times when people have said that, and I just, you know, it's all thought, and I think there could be a lot of misconception with that, and I just, yeah, just thought it might be nice to hear you guys talk about that.
Yeah, nice, Kath. I like that.
Yeah, because I'm aware that she may wake up any moment.
Mm.
I think normally 2 hours is her max. It's weird. One of the things on a course when I was sharing and Dave was in the audience, and then you told a story. I can't actually remember which one it was now, but it was something you'd observed in the natural world when working. And something just suddenly struck me like, wow, I've thought of thought as being cognitive. I've thought of thought as the principle that I kind of understood, and I've kind of separated the principles. What you're talking about is thought as a power that describes and runs through everything, the trees, the ants, the everythingness. Thought is just a noise or a word to describe God or creator, and actually it's all thought. It's the same as saying it's all consciousness, or it's all mind, or it's all God, or it's all love. And it was suddenly just seeing, I can see why it's so helpful to see the equation of mind plus thought plus consciousness equals reality or experience, or but to be able to step back and see it as a description of something that we can't really describe, but we can get a feel for. It made thought suddenly blow my mind, because honestly I used to think, well, I can talk about thought, I understand thought, but very much the time I probably would have been speaking to thinking, what goes through our mind. And one of the things Sid often was heard saying was, it's not what you think, it's that you think. It's not thinking, it's the power of thought. So it's so much bigger than what I'd imagined. And at this point, I'd been around the principles like 10 years or something. And it suddenly thought just grew for me. Because any concept we have of a word or of this understanding, it's not it, that's my concept. And you can't put the everythingness or the allness or the isness into a concept, because that will be a thought. You know, it's coming to me via thought, and then I'm kind of, I remember you describing it as you're collapsing the infinite potential into a thought.
Into a potential, yeah.
Into one potential. And I think when I stopped thinking I knew something about the principles or thought, the kind of wordless knowledge filled me up, and it made more sense, if that makes sense. So I think if we can, so I remember somebody once said, I think it was to you actually, Kath, why did he use the word mind? I think it doesn't sit right with me, because, you know, there's that Mind, the mental health charity, and I don't like that word. And it's interesting because people can take offense or not like a noise or a word, but the word is just a pointer or a guide or a vehicle trying to show you something, to get you to see something else. It's a signpost. And I think if that word gets in your head, then you've got like mind, consciousness, you've got the other words that you can pull upon, and they're all trying to point to that same place. And it's not in our head that we're going to get it. We can't understand it. And I think when we think we've got it, we haven't, because we're going to have collapsed it into a potential concept. So I feel like letting go of our ideas of needing to understand.
You can't know it.
And I think the last thing I was going to say is when we're in Russia, Rudy and I went to Russia in 2014, I think it was. And it was so interesting working with translators, because in Russian there is no direct translation for or a word to mean consciousness. So we'd say the word consciousness, and the person translating would have to do all this description to try and point people to what they thought we were trying to point to when we said the word consciousness. And you kind of realize, oh my God, we can get so lost in language. But luckily, despite the kind of clumsy vehicle of language, that feeling that comes alive in us, I feel like that's what guides us. That's the real kind of power, when we just start to get a more beautiful feeling, and then that moves and guides us, and we get gifted new thought, insight, new experience, new feeling. I don't know, that's what occurs to me.
Yeah, I've always been nature boy, as anybody who knows me knows. And the day I woke up was the moment I looked at a jackdaw that flew over a crow. Probably spoke about this a million times, but I saw a jackdaw fly over me. I was stood by a wall after I listened to Sid on a little hill, on the side of a little hill in the Lake District, on the Potter Fell Road, on Potter Fell, and overlooking Kendal. And as I looked at it, I saw it look at me. So I was obviously not normally on its landscape, you know, so I was quite interested. I took its attention. I grabbed its attention. My blue van, my little dog Rusty, and I was stood holding Rusty. And it looked at me, and as I looked at it, that's when I had my awakening. And but in that, to put words to something I can't put words to, one of the things I recognized was that the same thing was looking out of the jackdaw that was looking out of me. I could see life. I knew about life. I studied life at college. I studied ecology, plants and animals and the environment. And I'd always been aware of life, but I'd never been aware of life until it presented itself in all its magnificence. And that changed my understanding of life. It changed my understanding of what life actually is. And I got to realize and see and experience the spiritual. And when I say the spiritual, it's this right here, right now. It's not something else. It's this moment. It's right here, right now for everyone. The very fact that you can be here and listen and talk and think is the spiritual in action. Spiritual isn't something we attain. It's what we already are and what we already are and what we always were. But we create all these concepts via thought and then think we're inadequate and we need to be something else. When in actual fact, we're already exactly what we were searching for. Well, perhaps not in my case, I wasn't even searching for it, but I was searching for it because I wanted happiness, I wanted peace, I wanted contentment in life, I wanted a different life. But since that moment when I was a tree surgeon back then, like, I started to become aware of the trees think. And the only way I became aware of that wasn't because I got to have some kind of spiritually interconnected conversation with them or anything like that. I just observed them. I just looked at the shapes of the trees. And I could see that. And please, I encourage anybody to do this. Walk through a woodland and look up. Look up. Look at how the trees don't touch one another. They're spatially aware. Look at a clump of trees that grows close together. They'll perhaps create the form of, yeah, that was there, wasn't it? They'll perhaps create the form of, well, you'll get this canopy of trees. So that'll be one. There'll be another one in there. And then you'll have another one in here. And it will create the canopy of one that looks like one tree, when in actual fact it's 4 or 5 trees growing closely together, but they don't grow into one another. They're spatially aware. They're conscious of each other's presence. They are as aware as the jackdaw was aware, and the jackdaw was aware as I was aware in that moment. It was just awareness. It was just consciousness. And so I also noticed that, you know, that when I cut them, when I reduced them, they healed just like me. So there must be some level of awareness and thought that tells my arm to heal. If I've just recently cut my knuckle, it's healing so wonderfully well, unbelievably well. But there must be an acknowledgement that there is a wound in order for the process of healing to start to take place, and what needs to be implemented in order for me to start to heal. That's to be the acknowledgement, then the knowledge as to what to pump into action. And the same thing happens for the trees. The thing is about trees, though, they don't have a brain. And I've heard people say, but Dave, the wood wide web is the brain. not to the field tree, not to the isolated field tree, it's not. But that tree is still equally as capable of healing, of, when it's reduced, of coming back with what's called epicormic growth, where it sticks out lots of growth. If I was to take off 40 years growth off a sycamore, say, 40 years worth of growth, it could be back to its original, like gain that 40 years worth of growth back in about 6 or 7 years and get back to the same size it was very, very rapidly, very, very rapid cell reproduction to create the canopy. No brain. Look at, as you walk through the woodland, look for the trees going for the light. They grow, they maneuver themselves, and they find their patch of light, and they, here I am, good, nice one, found it. Very aware, making decisions. They're not random, they're intelligent. Look at a woodland that hasn't been managed, and you'll see that it grows in an arc with the trees on the edge, just having the majority of their foliage on the edge. And as you get taller trees in the middle, the foliage is really only on the top. And this creates an aerodynamic an aerodynamic kind of whole structure, which every single tree plays its part in the protection of the whole. And this is a multi-species thing. I mean, obviously, if you get a Douglas fir thrown in there, it is genetically designed to massively exceed everything else, but that's the nature of Douglas firs. But if you stick with like the native species in general, what they'll do is they'll all cooperate together. They know where they are in regard to the woodland, and they will grow accordingly to where they are placed in the woodland. There's an intelligence that runs through all of it. Now, intelligence, thinking as you were speaking, another word you could use for mind, if somebody doesn't like the word mind, is intelligence. If somebody doesn't like the word consciousness, another word you could use for consciousness would be intelligence. And another word for thought, if you don't like the word thought, another word you could use would be intelligence. Intelligence passes through all things. Every single atom is intelligence in action, born from intelligence. Every single cell is capable of existing and living as we expect something to live, as we picture living, separate from the entity it was removed from. Epigenetics prove that. So when we're talking about thought, people often think of thought as thinking. Oh, good arse, Luce. Bottom. Good bottom. People often think of thought as thinking, and what we hope is that people will start to get a sense of thought is so much bigger than just thinking. So, for example, one time I was, forgive me if you've heard this a million times or whatever, but a thorn once blew my mind when I got a thorn in my hand. As I was pulling it out, I was covered in these thorns in my hands. I was climbing a holly tree full of roses at the time. Crappy job that was. But a little voice came in my head and it asked me a question. It asked me, why do plants have thorns? And that was a very simple answer. Well, plants have thorns to protect them. I know that. Stood there having a conversation with myself. And the next question it asked me was, but how does it work? And I stood there and I thought to myself, well, the thorn enters my skin. I don't like the feel of it. I'm going to give the thorn a bit of a wide berth. The thorny plant, I'm going to give a bit of wide berth. It feels uncomfortable when I touch it. Thistles, nettles, holly, blackthorn, hawthorn, whatever you've got in your cactuses, whatever you've got in your countries. They're everywhere. The thorn is a beautiful thing. Acacia, some of the most savage are acacia. And then the next question it asked me was, it wanted me to get a bit more, come on, Ellery, think. How does it work? And I could feel there was some kind of magic in this kind of conversation I was having with myself. I knew this was going somewhere, but I didn't quite know where. And I thought to myself, I thought back to my school days, and I remember learning about the immune system, the nervous system, my apologies. And I thought to myself, well, the thorn, it irritates my nervous system, sends a message to my brain. And my awareness, the consciousness, the living aspect of me becomes aware of it. And right, your body's in danger here, remove your hand. And the next question was the question that I wasn't expecting and really blew my mind. The next question it asked me was, but how does a plant of the plant kingdom understand the nervous system of the animal kingdom when the plant of the plant kingdom does not have a nervous system attached to the brain? How does the plant of the plant kingdom understand the nervous system of the animal kingdom? Because without the nervous system, it said, the thorn has no value, is what it said to me. I remember being so confused, I didn't know the answer to that. How does the plant of the plant kingdom know about the nervous system, the animal kingdom? Because without the nervous system, the thorn has zero value. And a few weeks later, it just occurred to me, the plant doesn't know. I didn't know about my nervous system in terms of Dave, didn't know about my nervous system until I went to college and school and whatnot and learnt about it. But that makes the thorn, makes the nervous system, the intelligence, the thought that dreamt the idea of thorn into this worldly dimension is the same force that dreamt nervous system into this dimension, that thought humanity was a good idea. You know, evolution, physical evolution cannot take place without thought. Thought is the thing that creates evolution, that drives evolution. No species evolves itself in the wrong direction. Everything evolves itself in the perfect direction. Everything evolves for the betterment of itself and to fit the environment. But without that awareness of the change in the environment, there could be no idea as to how to move forward, to drive itself forward, to evolve with the times. So when we're talking about thought, we're talking about the intelligence that lives all things. We're talking about something so, we're just scratching the surface of it. And to limit it down to a thought or thinking is to do the power of thought, such that it's missing the point, and nobody will ever find what the principles is pointing to by looking at their thinking. It's going beyond the thinking to I often call it the ocean of thought. A thinking is a wave on an ocean, but the ocean is the infinite potential. The ocean is the space from which all things are born. There's an intelligence. I'm looking out of the window right now and looking at all the chlorophyll. Now, the chlorophyll only exists because the sun exists. The chlorophyll in the leaves only exists because the sun exists. Now, the earth has never actually been in direct contact with the sun, I assume. And I believe it's 92 million miles away is the sun from the earth. But built into every single chlorophyll cell on the plant, there is knowledge of the sunlight. It's taken thought to create the chlorophyll cell. It's taken thought to create everything. Thought creates everything. The mystics throughout time have called reality the dream of life. What is a dream? Well, it's a thought. It's thought created experience. And why? And we tend to think that there must be two modalities of working: the sleep state awareness of reality and the awake state of awareness of reality. But in actual fact, there's only one mechanism by which reality is born, whether we are asleep in our dream state sleep or we are awake. It's the same process that creates reality. My Grumpelstiltskins. So when the conversation is born of it's all thought, we must go beyond, you know, leave me my pad, or leave me some paper. You take some paper. There's those big pens over there if you want them. Yeah. Well, yeah, we must, if we choose, if we want to, go beyond our idea of what we think thought is, that we think we know what it is. You can't know it. Like Jen said, to think you know it is to, thought is infinite potential. Quantum field is thought. And to think you know it is to take an infinite potential, like walking. I often liken it to walking out in the middle of the Sahara Desert, picking up a grain of sand and going, oh, that's the Sahara Desert. I always thought it was much bigger than that. No, it's the Sahara Desert isn't that grain of sand. That grain of sand was an aspect of the Sahara Desert. Or like going out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean and going, oh, that wave there is the ocean, but just that wave. It's so much vast. It's infinitely vast. But we cannot get our head around infinite. But thought is what makes everything. It's a word to describe the creative force of the universe. Now, the creative force of the universe created everything within the universe, and we are an aspect of that as a human identity. And the same force that creates the universe is the same force that courses through us for us to create our reality. Everything is the mind of God, whatever that means to an individual. To me, I'm not talking religion. I don't have a problem with the word God. If you just take the time to look up amazing wildlife camouflage, look at them. Perhaps look at a leaf-tailed gecko or a pygmy seahorse, or there's a snake that looks like a viper in the Costa Rican jungle. Have a look at it. Tell me that wasn't well thought out when it was implemented into creation and existence on this earthly plane. It was so well thought out. But look at ourselves, look how well thought out we are. Humanity is not is not one of human beings' inventions. Some intelligence dreamt us into being, thought we were a good idea. I was taught at school, it's random. It's not random. That's a complete and utter misunderstanding. It's not random. It's beautifully orchestrated. Life has the ability to maneuver, mold, change. Look at Chernobyl. Scientists who believe it's all random, I assume, said that life would not exist in Chernobyl for 1,000 years. But Chernobyl is full of life. It's teeming with life, and it's all resilient to the radiation. It's adapted, it's evolved, it's become capable. There is a fungus apparently growing in the Fukushima nuclear reactor. One of the most lethal places on the planet, life has taken hold, apparently. There is now a fungus that is consuming plastic. Cigarette butts is a fungus that consumes cigarette butts as well. Nature is intelligent. It's like a river. In order to clean up the environment, if you want to clean up a river, just stop putting shit in it and the river will clean itself. All environments like that. If we stop putting crap in it, nature is intelligent and it will figure it out, and it will find a way around it, because it thinks well. It's intelligent. It is all things. It knows all things. And we'll go to a break in a second, but I remember being at one of Jen's retreats, and Jen was speaking, and this lady said, "What you're saying makes so much sense." She said, "My husband does original biblical translations," and she said 20 years ago, so this would be about 2014, I went to this retreat. She said 20 years ago, my husband came back and said, I think the opening statement in the New Testament's inaccurate. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. She said, he came home and said, if I was to translate that, he said, a more accurate translation, I think, would be, in the beginning was thought. Thought was with God, and thought was God. And she said, and you're saying the same thing. And I remember listening to a talk on Jesus, and it's called The Mystery of the Essenes by Theodore Nottingham on Spotify, if anybody's interested. It's a wonderful talk. It's curious about Jesus and his message, and I listened to this talk, and I remembered them saying this, and I'll probably quote him pretty accurately when I said, because I heard him say this halfway through. Now, the Essenes were a group of people that lived in the Israel area a couple of thousand years ago. Some people say Jesus was an Essene and Mary Magdalene was an Essene. Some people say Jesus spent time with the Essenes, but somehow there was a link with Jesus and the Essenes. And the Essenes saw themselves apparently as this almost separate set of humans to the rest of the world. And the only thing that created their kind of identity wasn't their skin color, their hair, or anything like that. It was their, what they described as their inner luminescence, their inner light, their awareness state. And in the Essenes, the Essenes community, they lived almost like a utopian, had a utopian kind of society whereby there was no hierarchy. Everybody, man, woman, child, was equal. Everything was shared. It was a collaboration. Very utopian kind of society. And I was really enjoying this talk, and then Theodore Nottingham came out with this statement. He said, the Essenes, therefore, saw thought as the highest, most powerful force in the universe, as it was seen as the instigator of both feeling and action. The Essenes, therefore, trained themselves to harness this power in a positive way. Knowing that every single thought they thought sent out a vibration into the whole and affected the collective unconscious. The Essenes therefore saw thought as the highest, most powerful force in the universe, and they learned to harness it in a positive way. Thought can destroy a world, and thought can heal the world. But thought is so much bigger. The highest, most powerful force in the universe. That's what we're talking about. And we're all it. We've misidentified our true nature too, and compartmentalized ourselves into a set of ideas that we're not. Those are thoughts, those are ideas. That's what the ego is. The ego is an idea, it's a thought. Don't actually exist. All right, let's take a 10-minute break. I've got UK time 20 to 5 on my watch, so we'll come back at 10 to 5 UK time, which is 10 minutes. We'll go and get 10 minutes, use a loo, make a brew. I would like to say, if anybody wants to discuss anything and they don't want it recording, just shout and we'll pause the recording and then we can have a conversation. But yeah, I'd like to go back to questions, reflections, observations. Hear from you lot. Jen's listening in. She's on a headphone. She's with Lucia.
It was really useful, Dave, to hear that description of thought. Because obviously, you know, when I first heard about the principles, you assume that thought is a cognition. So to see that it was something that what you were pointing at was different to the common usage of the word has been really, really useful. So thank you for that. And you're using nature as an explanation has been really powerful as well. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, love. No, nature has been my biggest teacher.
Yeah.
Nature is my biggest teacher.
And we're part of that.
We are it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, love. There was never a separation took place between humanity and nature, and it was all in our mind.
I guess that's what they refer to as the fall, you know, the illusion that we're separate.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. It seemed to me if that was true, we're in the rise again then.
Absolutely.
But it never changed anything, because the separation never once took place. We just thought we were separate. We thought we were bodies, just these little lonely islands. And then for some reason, throughout time, people pointed us to the point that we're not just a body. And it's really obvious to see that anybody who ever comes across somebody who's died, you know, a relative or a friend, or perhaps they go and see them in the I don't know if they're in the chapel of rest or at home or whatever, or perhaps they've been with somebody who's passed, and they would say they're not there anymore. But the body's clearly there, but they're not there. You know, and it's like there clearly is an energetic or spiritual or whatever you want to call it, soul thing enlivening the body that is living it, that's animating the body. There's obviously an intelligence. And so there has to be this. How we missed that point, I have got no idea why that became an irrelevance, because it's not an irrelevance, it's a purely relevant thing. It's an incredibly relevant, it's a purely relevant thing. It's a really important thing for it to realign ourselves with. Yeah. It's an exciting place to live. Thank you. Thanks, Leslie. Love. Hey up, Chris lad.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Are you all right?
Yeah, cool, man.
Thanks for the donation, buddy. Really appreciate it.
No worries, man.
All right. Any more questions, reflections, observations?
I've got a can you hear me? I couldn't get my hand up button. I just love hearing so much when you speak about the nature, because it's just, yes, I suppose a lot of my attention's there too, and I can feel my mind trying to work it out, and questions popped in like going, okay, so that's mind, then that's thought, and then I'm just like, no, just let it all go. And then it's like the more I can just go, just let it go, don't just leave it alone. There's just this, I don't know what it is. It just feels, yeah, it feels it feels more expansive than to try and answer the questions that pop up.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? Trying to find a word to describe an experience.
Mm.
You realize how we have so much value in words. We place so much value on words. We often think we understand something if we can articulate it into a sentence. It's our kind of how we measure our knowledge. It's certainly what we do at school.
Mm.
How well can you put this into a sentence? How well can you articulate this? But when it comes to experience, you realize the word actually quite often falls short. There are no words. now we're getting closer to the truth.
Mm.
The truth is a wordless, conditionless, other than. It is pure love. It is boundless. These are just words. But the actual thing itself is total freedom. I love it when we struggle to put words on things. What did he say? Your computer's making a funny noise there.
Yeah, it sounds like a big fart, doesn't it? You know what it's doing? It's sliding down the wall towards
that what
me.
it
Yeah, I just
Right.
did. I'm trying to hide it. Yeah, no, I'm just very, very grateful for a space which allows for that curiosity and yeah, because it the more I listen, especially when it comes to the natural world, like, and how incredible our bodies are, and the more I go for mind conscious thought, but actually it's like all of them are all of them. If that makes any sense. Like the absolute incredibleness of how the season changes. Yeah, it all blows me away how yeah, it's all the same in a way. I'm going to mute myself so I stop farting.
No, you're right, Sarah. Mind, consciousness, thought, trying to figure all that stuff out that's the domain of the intellect. It's the domain of the ego. It's the role of the intellect. It's the role of the ego. But that's all too late. That's looking at the too lateness of life. And we don't want to go to the too late. We want to start. We've always looked at the too late. We've always looked at creation. Creation is too late. The moment it's created, too late. You won't find truth in it. You have to start to find that expansiveness. And it's in that expansiveness, that expansive feeling, where it starts to reveal. And I don't know. I know what I've seen is the most shallow frigging scratch on the surface of something so inexplicable. That excites me. It keeps me interested. It's like that saying of Jesus, to enter the kingdom, you must become like a child. What are the attributes of children? First of all, what is this kingdom he's talking about? Well, he's talking about the kingdom of God. And when he was asked in the book of Thomas, he was asked, where is this kingdom of God? He said, the kingdom of God is all over the face of the earth, but mankind cannot see it. It sees trees, it sees houses, it sees cars, it sees buses, it sees fields, it sees ocean, it sees over here, over there, it sees you, it sees me, it sees duality, it sees different. And another time he was asked the same question, where is this God's kingdom? And his next answer was, God's kingdom is within the heart of every man, woman and child. I and the Father are one. There's another thing he said, I, which we all are, we're all I and the Father are one. What is I? He also spoke an awful lot about I am. The I amness of life. I am is what we are, is a descriptive two words to describe what we are before we then put the label of ego on it. I am depressive. I am an addict. And quite often people, more often than not, identify with the latter part rather than the I am part. They identify with the latter. I am an addict. I am a depressive. I am straight. I am whatever, gay. I am whatever it be. I'm a tree surgeon. I'm a 3 principles facilitator. And he's saying, no, look at I am. I am is within the words I am is all the truth you need. Everything else is a story. Everything else is an illusion. Stop being mesmerized by the illusion. Start to become aware. Thanks, Sarah. Beck, you had your hand up first, love.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, love, I can hear you.
Yeah, yeah. First thing, actually, hi, everybody. It's a while since I've done anything like this, so this is a real treat. So thank you. What's that? Sorry?
A while since we've seen you.
I know. I've yeah, had my head down. But the first thing was that, like, I've been kind of around this stuff for about 14 years. And I've just had that moment of like, oh, thinking's not thought. And it's like, duh.
An aspect.
That was just like, oh. And then it got me thinking, because I've just been on a 10-day silent retreat, which I didn't think I'd get through, but I did. And I didn't realize how much I had on thinking and how much I made meaning of thinking, until I was in a place where you were calming everything down and sitting in that stillness, not able to talk to anybody, not able to look at anybody, and how powerful it was. Just, you know, I mean, you were talking about nature, and obviously the only thing that we got to do other than with meditation is to be out in nature. And I couldn't believe how powerful it was to be out with, you know, with the trees and that. And every day from sort of day one, I kept seeing this little robin, this lovely little fat robin. And what was really amazing is I've never really listened to birds, never really had an interest in birds, but this robin just kept me whenever I went for my walk 3 times a day, he was there. And it was this, I'm sure it's the same one because it had the same markings. And it was like we had this conversation without anything happening. And as the days went on and I got quieter inside, and then I was noticing I can hear him. I can hear his song. So I know he's here. And then all of a sudden he would fly down to the branch where I was. And it was just like, oh my God, it's almost like I can't explain it, but it was just so powerful to know that there was that connection, and to know that there was like no need for any words, any dialogue or anything. And it just was such a, now I'm kind of saying it out loud, it almost sounds a bit silly because I've never said it to anybody, but it was such a powerful connection and it's so special. And I don't know, it was one of the things that had such a big impact on me from doing this retreat. And I kind of came out the other side of it, struggling to get back into everyday living, actually, because I have a different appreciation now for that space. Not quite sure where I've said this, but I felt the need to say something.
Yeah. Well, that space will change your life.
Yeah.
Because once you touch that space, it collapses everything you thought you knew, which is everything you ran your life off. Now, once that's collapsed, your life has to be different. I chose never to get a mortgage or get involved in the rat race again. Didn't make sense. My life changed in a moment. I chose to be loving over aggressive. That space it changes people's lives. The people who, bearing in mind every single soul that exists will be filled with that space. They have to be, because it's who and what they are. At some point the story has to collapse, because it's a story. It's the house that's built on sand.
Mm.
Once it fills you, once it reveals itself, or you reveal it, you reveal yourself, you allow yourself through. If you haven't allowed yourself through yet, you haven't finished playing your game. You're still enjoying it. You'll tell yourself you're not. But you can't be hurt, you cannot be damaged. You're not what you think you are. You just show up as you think. Show up as you think. No, I think that's beautiful, Beck, that, you know, and this is the other thing, there's people have it happen to them through, thanks to Sid Banks, but it wasn't also, it was a jackdaw. Thank you, Jackdaw. You know, it happens. It's the most natural thing in the world. Some people find it through listening to some religious scripture, and they'll associate themselves then as, say, born again Christian or something like that. I talk about the three principles. I call it the three principles because, thanks to Sid, well, three principles is just a conversation. What people all over the world have happened to them is, it doesn't mean they're special in any way whatsoever. They're just the most normal people on the planet, just like everybody else. There's no hierarchy in anything. But they'll start to live differently. And they'll find what some people may look at as a bravery, but to them it's not a bravery, it just doesn't make sense to live like that anymore. Hey, Baba. And they'll just live a different life. I look at it and look at me and Jen. I mean, we've had people slate us for how we live our lives. We've had people say that we shouldn't do via donation retreats. Otherwise, you'll end up living at home with your mum and dad, is what one person actually said. What a gift. We get to spend time with our families. What a terrible thing. What a thing to try and avoid. We live in a van for the other part of the time, or we just live wherever we stood. Enjoy it. We have a wonderful life. Sorry, Beck.
I was just going to say, actually, what was interesting was about 2 days after I got home, basically something happened, which means I have to move again. I've moved about 5 times in the last couple of years for different reasons. And this time, you know, I'm having to literally sell everything I've got to go and live in a room. And there's a part of me would have thought at 54, in fact, even my kids have said, but this is not right. You're 54 years old, you should be settled, you should have your own house and all your stuff. And but there's a part, I know, and there's a part of me, and my daughter's actually the reason I'm having to move. But, well, she's decided, you know, anyway. But there's a part of me that I'm finding it so freeing to kind of like be able to let go of, you know, like I'm noticing the stuff I'm looking at now and kind of going, that meant so much to me. I spent, you know, a long time sleeping on the floor to save for that lovely solid oak bed, which I'm probably going to sell on Facebook for 50 quid, you know. And there's a part of me that thinks, God, how freeing though to not, you know, not to be defined by all of that stuff, and to be able to, you know, kind of have that freedom of movement in some ways as well. And so actually it feels quite exciting now. And I actually feel I'm quite lucky because I'm 54 and I'm not going to be laid down by mortgages and debts. And I like that, you know, because, and also if something comes up, I can just go, you know, and I really love the thought of that, You know, it's almost like I feel like the 20 something, that because they've just all both gone to university, my kids, and I kind of feel like I'm at that exciting stage, but kind of, you know, obviously 30 years on, but it's the next level, you know.
Yeah. You know, I was in Nepal with Jenny and Rudy after the earthquakes, 2015. And we went to this village which had been completely destroyed. And I remember, I've mentioned this before, but in my village, Staveley, just above Kendal, between Kendal and Windermere in the Lake District, we've got all the headquarters of your big outdoor brands like North Face, Mammut, Merrill, Montaigne, Innovate. There's Marmot down the road, Low Alpine, Haglofs, Mountain Hardware, and Columbia. They're all within like a 10-minute drive of me, and sometimes they have sample sales and stuff like that. So I went round these companies and said, I'm going out to Nepal, do you want to donate anything? So I got a load of stuff donated, and I carried this stuff around me for ages, waiting for the right people, really. And you got towards the end and went to this village where it was completely destroyed. People had been killed, and their stupa, their place where they worshipped, had absolutely destroyed. And by the time we got there, they had tiny little bricks. I mean, our bricks are like that. These bricks are like that. And every single one was cleaned off, and they'd neatly stacked them all, and people were living in these bamboo and corrugated iron huts. Monsoon was coming, and we were walking through this village, and we saw these 3 girls come out of this house, and this house had collapsed. So that's the roof there. I don't know if you can see that. That's the roof, and the roof was hanging, and all this bit here had disappeared, and the roof was just kind of hanging. And these 3 girls held hands and ran out of this house. I mean, it'd be completely condemned in our country. You wouldn't be allowed near it, but people were living in it. And these girls had the whitest shirts I've ever seen. They skipped and they laughed as they jumped on all the stones and went to school. We went there as like thinking we could help. I remember seeing my own ego in that country when I saw how I thought these people all needed help. They were all right. But this one man in particular, I met him in this village, and he was in one of these huts, and I spoke to him, and I thought to myself, you're the man I want to give all this stuff to. There's a few £100 there. And the average wage in Nepal at that time was $2 a day. And they had a few £100 worth of good quality stuff. Nepal is a place for travelers and expedition liking people, you know, and Everest's there, and all your big mountains, Annapurna and whatnot. And I said to him, would you please take this stuff? I said, you can take it to Tamil and you can sell it, and you'll get a good price for it, and it'll help you. And I remember this man who had absolutely nothing. I asked him where his house was, and he pointed at a neatly stacked pile of bricks. And I remember him saying to him, would you please take this? And he just went, no, thank you. Very polite. And he then just looked me right in the eye, and he put his hand on his heart, and he just said to me, I have everything I need, thank you. He had nothing in terms of possessions. But I knew he was right. I knew he was right. He had everything he needed. He had everything he needed to deal with his life. He knew that. I remember I walked out of that hut and I just burst into tears. cried. I knew he was right. All these conditions I thought I needed in order to be all right. All these conditions I thought I needed in order to be valid and successful. That was one of the most successful human beings I've ever met in my life. He had nothing. We had everything. Sometimes, Beck, these things are our greatest gifts. How could you ever know your unbreakable spirit unless it's tested? These things bring, this is one of these things show us. My sister, I wish I'd brought my phone. She got this message and it said something along the lines of, you've faced all the storms. No, you haven't weathered the storms, darling child. You've been thrashed by the rain. Have you been struck by the lightning? All has shown you in the face of the things you fear the most. No damage was done. I love that. You have not weathered the storms, darling child. You have been thrashed by the rain, and you've been struck by the lightning, and all have shown you in the face of the things that you fear the most. No damage was done. Look back at our lives. No damage was done. We're all right. In the face of the things that scared us the most, we were all right. And we will continue to be so because that's the nature of life. The only thing that creates the illusion that we are not all right is our judgments, our concepts, thought. Helen, love.
Hiya. I've kind of forgotten what I was going to say. Oh yeah, I was just when you were talking to Sarah, I remembered something you said earlier, and funnily enough, Mary's just commented on the same thing in the chat about when Sid would say to listen for a feeling, because I've always heard people say that, or I remember hearing people say that, like not people sharing the principles, but just people talking about, oh, I've heard Sid say to listen for a feeling. And I've always taken it, or thought other people as well, have kind of taken it to, oh, okay, so you're looking for a particular feeling. And then the way you said it today, or was it Jen? I can't remember, one of you said it. It just made so much more sense that it was, you're listening for a feeling as opposed to listening for information. It was just like, yeah, just another one of those nice little subtle, when you just hear something, you've heard it before, but you hear something deeper or different. And what Mary was saying, something slightly different, but about the same, about the same thing.
Yeah, another way you could say is you're listening for an experience.
Yeah, I like that.
You're listening, that's another way you could say it. You're listening for an experience. And it'll be a new experience. It'll be a revelatory experience. But it'll be revelatory because the intellect doesn't know it. But you will. That's the irony of all this. All these words is just a conversation to point people to the point that, no, you're already it. You're not going to gain anything through this conversation. You're not going to gain anything through this conversation. You don't gain anything. You never lost anything. It's like having a rake and you're raking up all your leaves. All of a sudden you chuck your rake down and I'm going to get the blower out. You blow up all your leaves and you've lost your rake. You haven't lost your rake, it's just underneath the leaves. Underneath all the crap. It's probably a really crap analogy. But then at some point, you come across your rake again. It's like, it's a really shit analogy. It was never lost, it was just covered up. It was forgotten, it was just forgotten. What is it to forget? To not think about it? To not draw it into the now. That's what forgetting is. You know, these conversations, they don't give anybody anything. They've already got it. They're already it. That's the joke of the whole thing. Remember, one of my dear friends came to community group and she said she'd been trying to fix herself for 20 years and she'd never had any success. Jen said, "Oh, that's interesting. Do you know why that is?" And she said, no. And Jen said, "Have you ever considered it was because you were trying to fix something that was never broken? That's why you couldn't fix it." No, I'd not considered that. Sit down. And she had a big shift. When she stopped trying to fix herself, she discovered she was already whole. When we're trying to fix ourselves, if you really look closely, what we'll see is we're trying to run away from feelings. The thing that we think is an indication of broken is a feeling state. That's all it is. Analyze that. Analyze the hell out of that point. See if you can come up with a different answer. We're afraid of feelings. We think feelings mean something other than being indication of where we are at within our mind. What we believe to be true or what we believe to be false, what we believe to be possible or impossible, or our judgments, in other words. Feelings are indicative of our judgments. Not brokenness. No thought is broken. Can you break a thought? How can you break experience? How can you break reality? You can't break reality, you can't break thought, you can't break experience, you can't break consciousness, you can't break mind, you can't be broken. Never were broken. I don't know what words wake up people. I remember one lady came and she came and did an intensive with us from New Zealand, and she decided she wanted to do a 6-month program with Jen and I. And after the first intensive, I remember we were sat waiting for the train, and Jen and I used to love watching Fail Army. I don't know if anybody's ever come across that. It's just videos of people filming themselves and buckling and doing stupid stuff and not quite making it, and some people get hurt in it. It's just stupidity, really. Just fails. And our friend said, she said, "Why would you even do that?" I think some bloke was jumping off a roof into a wheelie bin of water and didn't quite make it. It's an idiot. And I said, I thought about it for a moment. I said, I suppose people just want to experience. Didn't even give it a thought. It's just all that came out of my mouth. I never gave it. I don't even remember saying it. She got on the train and she phoned us up and she said, halfway home on back down to London, sorry, on the train, she said that came back into her mind, and she said she just had this full-on experience, and she said it's changed everything. Throwaway comment. Because it's not in my words, it's from within the person, it's from within the individual who's listening that the power truly lies. And that's why I always say, you know, people have their favorite people to listen to. My kind of people that I'm in awe of are those that hear. Those are my heroes, those that hear. It takes a certain level of humility, whether it's conscious or unconscious, to hear. But it is, it's in the hearing. It's not in any word, like Sarah was describing. It's before the intellect. It's before the ego. And that's not a time thing. It just means they're creations. But what we all are is creator. Creating a reality, creating a dream of life that we take so seriously because we think it's all real. We think it's more solid than a dream. Check it out. Look at that point. See how many times a day you change your mind on a subject. See how many times a day you feel like shit and pissed off and arsey, and then 10 minutes later you're not. Look at your partner and how they can do your tits in 1 minute, and the next minute they're great. Or 1 minute they're great, next minute they're doing your tits in. You haven't really done anything. It's just we go in and out of all different kinds of experience, and every single one of it looks real and looks like truth. That's the game. That's what it's meant to look like. It's meant to look like that. That's why it took for me, Sid, to come along and go, hey, lost boy over there, lost boy. Guess what? Do you know what your depression is? You being lost. You being lost in your own creation, but you don't know you created it. You holding on to the past, thinking it's somehow relevant now and serving you. So obvious. It's so obvious, it's ridiculous, but we don't see it because our intellect can't handle how simple it is. It wants to make it really, really complicated, and it wants to make it really, really, oh, it started raining. It wants to make it really, really kind of special. Something that when I attain this, I'm going to be so fucking special. But in reality, everybody's already the attainment of it. They are it. There was never anything to attain. That's what Sid's message is all about. That's what the principles is all about. That's why it's not an approach, because it's just a description of the pre-existing. The wholeness that lies within the center of everything. And anybody who thinks that they're separate from that, well, that's a frigging big ego. That's a big lump of ego. Anybody who thinks they're broken. Trust me, that's one of the greatest egos on the planet. I'm not being cruel when I say that. I've been that. One of the biggest egos on the planet is the idea that we're broken. Is the idea somehow I'm more broken, I'm more damaged than everybody else. That's some seriously big ass ego, that. And I say that because I've been it. Right. I'm going to let Kia in and I'm going to take a break. Hiya, Kia, love. Welcome. We're going to take a break now, love. It's just gone 5:30. So we'll be coming back. Can we come back around 10 to 7, 5 to 7, something like that? And then we've got just one sec. Jen, Chris Heath at 7 o'clock, isn't it? Yeah. So we're coming back 7 o'clock UK time, which is about in an hour and 25 minutes. All right, and then we've
Okay. All right. See you then.
all right, love. So yeah, if we come back in about an hour and 20 minutes, that'll be grand.
What time do you have now?
Yeah, so in the UK it is 25 to 6, 5:35, and we're coming back at 7.
Yeah. Okay. It's all right then.
All right.
I got it. Bye.
God bless everyone. See you soon.
See you soon.